All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome back, everybody, from lunch. We're going to begin the afternoon program with the plenary session for today. And I'm going to introduce the moderator for the plenary session. He will introduce the topic, and then the panelists, and then we will begin the discussion. So we're delighted to have with us here again today Greg Lucier, who is the chairman and CEO of Life Technologies, a small company up the road in Carlsbad, soon to become part of a larger company, I guess. Mm-hmm. So obviously a lot going on in their world, but I think we all know that Life has been a very strong supporter of this industry, certainly this meeting, and really what we're all about here in this room, and certainly the sector of regenerative medicine. And Greg and I were talking briefly beforehand, and I think he certainly sees that we're making tremendous progress in this space. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Greg Lucier, Chairman and CEO of Life Technologies.
Maury, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope that we can answer your questions and really make this a fulfilling session over the next 45 to 60 minutes or so. Let me just first introduce the panel that we have, and then I'll say a few introductory words, and then I'll have each of them as well more formally introduce themselves and explain what they're doing in their own respective organizations. And so, here to my immediate left is Adel. He's with Baxter Corporation. Then we have Perry Karsen. He's with Celgene Therapeutics. Then we have Jason Gardner with GSK. And then off in the far left is Robert Willenbacher, and he's with Janssen Pharmaceuticals, a unit of Johnson & Johnson. You know, I thought I would just kick off the discussion here about big pharma, curiosity or commitment, by talking about my own journey running Life Technologies, trying to anticipate that question of when the larger organizations would be all in, fully committed to, I think, what all of you might believe, and I certainly do, is the next theme in therapeutics. And it's best told by this story that in 2004, as we were building up what ultimately became Life Technologies, we were buying a lot of organizations to consolidate research reagents, research instruments, and the like. And one of the companies we bought in 2004 was called Dynel, which was one of the largest biotechs in Norway, which isn't saying a lot, but it was actually a fairly large company, over $100 million, and very successful in research. And one of the reasons we bought Dynel is because of their magnetic beads and the very unique intellectual property surrounding these beads, and its importance in the cell therapy workflow that we saw happening into the future, but the not too distant future. So we paid a lot of money for that company, and that was in 2004. I cut forward to 2007 when I invited a researcher out of University of Pennsylvania that I had befriended named Carl June to come to my board meeting on the West Coast and talk about his T-cell, you guys have your phone on, can you just turn them off? His T-cell therapy work with leukemia. And I have a number of very prominent scientists on my board. I'm not a scientist, but I was really impressed with the data and what was possible here. And he gave a great talk, and at the end of his talk, he politely leaves, and several of the scientists basically give me 9 reasons why that was just total bullshit. Well, cut now forward to 2013, we just signed a multi-$100 million of deal with Novartis for that very same therapy to be their tools provider in the overall workflow that they're going to do with Carl June's efforts. Now, that's a full decade later, and I can assure you that was not on our pro forma when we bought that company back in 2004. We thought the reality of cell therapy would have happened sooner. So, you know, that's our own journey to build out this entire workflow of tools and reagents and capabilities to support what we thought would be the next theme. It's always just coming. Maybe now it is coming at kind of the time frame we're talking about. Just to finish up, a few other things that we've been working on beyond trying to piece together all of the essential workflows is to then string them all together and make sure that they work. And a good example of that we're doing is in the field of Parkinson's. One of the other businesses we have is genetic sequencing, and I've been sequenced, I've had my parents sequenced, and I carry the mutations for Parkinson's disease. So I've taken the understanding and the research of Parkinson's quite seriously. And so we just chose that as a disease state to follow and see if we could create a disease in a dish by putting together all these technologies, characterization of them, validating them, to ultimately create a disease in a dish around Parkinson's so that we could be there for companies that ultimately want to study that particular disease in a very robust way. So a lot of investment has gone in on our part, a lot of hope that this is going to be the next therapeutic class, and our goal here in this panel is to see, again, if it's a curiosity or a real commitment by these larger organizations. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, gentlemen, and we'll just work our way left to right. If you could share with us what you're working on, and just so everyone has a grounding of your perspective.
Sure.
Adel?
So, thanks, Greg. I really appreciate the opportunity for being here today. Very thankful for the organizer for inviting me. So as Greg has mentioned, I'm with Baxter and responsible for the clinical development of our CD34 cell therapy. For some of you who might not know our therapy, it's an autologous CD34 cell therapy that is being developed for a variety of cardiovascular indications. We're standing here, I'm representing here a team that has been added for the past 10 years or more. So really, we're in phase 3. We're pretty much advanced for our indication in chronic myocardial ischemia. And we're able to be in execution phase of a program that we got a buy-in on from the FDA, from the EMA, and from Health Canada. It was not an easy journey. Still, we're not done. But there's a lot of learning and I would say a lot of commitment from the corporation and the team members who are able to drive this through to that stage. So that is for chronic myocardial ischemia. We're also have over the past years completed early stage clinical trials in peripheral arterial disease, including critical limb ischemia and intermittent claudication. And we're also hoping to bring that, to continue to push that forwards into late-stage development. We're also looking at other emerging indications for CD34 cell therapy in chronic heart failure with reduced ejection fraction as well. So that's what it is. It's actually it's very exciting to be part of a development effort like that. Really, from a commitment perspective, I do believe that that's the one essential ingredient that's required for these innovative therapies to be pushed forward, to be propelled forward, because there's a lot of uncertainties and there's a lot of difficulties and a lot of things that come with a pioneering effort. So that's what it is.
Great. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Perry?
Thanks, Greg. So Celgene has been involved in cell therapy for about 10 years now. We started with an acquisition of a cord blood banking business called Anthrogenesis in the early 2000s, and that has become Celgene Cellular Therapeutics. For the last 10 years, Celgene has had the good fortune to be able to invest in cell therapy as we've advanced our own internal research and moved into the clinic. And what we have now is a very broad-based regenerative medicine business that was based initially on our cord blood banking business, where we bank cord blood as well as placental blood for various clients for potential use in the future. And we also use the materials that come out of that banking business as materials for our cell therapy products. We have various cell therapies that are moving forward in the clinic right now, in proof of concept, some safety dose ranging studies, as well as a whole effort on the tissue regeneration and the organ regeneration side, mainly using the placenta as that base of materials for those products. So we're firm believers. There's a huge commitment at Celgene in cellular medicine. We're not as foresightful or prescient as Greg was at Life Technologies and foreseeing what would happen with cell therapy, T cells, and CAR T in particular. But we have believed in this space for a long time, and we do believe that, certainly I do as CEO of the division, that in the 2020s, cell therapy will help fuel the growth of Celgene. So what it takes is that commitment, that belief, the perseverance, and I'm sure we'll talk today about what it will take to fully get recognized in credibility as we generate more clinical data.
Jason?
Okay. Hi, Greg. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be here on behalf of GlaxoSmithKline. So we have a number of programs active in regenerative medicine on the small molecule drug side. In the Discovery Alliance that we have with Harvard Stem Cell Institute, we set that up about 5 years ago. and we have a number of internal pipeline projects that use that strategy. We also have made a commitment to cell-based regenerative medicines through our gene therapy alliance using CD34 stem cells. We have a phase 3 asset that we're looking to file next year for ADA SCID, and that we've partnered with the Telethon Institute. I'm going to talk after this panel about that program, and there's a pipeline of medicines behind that. We also work with MolMed to make the vector. Coincidentally, that particular lentiviral vector was discovered next door at the SORP nearly 20 years ago. My own personal background, I'm a stem cell scientist, and I used many of those Dynel kits 20 years ago in my postdoc when we were enriching
CD34
cells.
They worked?
Every single time. And I've done drug discovery and development in different areas of medicine.
Rob?
Thanks, Greg, and thanks for the organizers for inviting me. I've really enjoyed the meeting. I've enjoyed all the panels as well as the company presentations. So Johnson & Johnson has actually been in cell therapy for the better part of 10 years in one way or another. And my involvement really began back in 2004 when we set up, through a corporate internal venturing process, what we called the stem cell internal venture. And with the goal of developing and commercializing a cell-based product. And that was initially, we started out in cardiac disease, based on a collaboration that Centocor had. Centocor is a legacy J&J monoclonal antibody biotech company. Through some twists and turns that come along with this technology, we actually shifted our focus to invest in an internally developed platform and moved into the field of ophthalmology retinal degeneration. In fact, that program that we started in 2004 is now in phase 2 clinical testing using a microcatheter delivery device in patients with advanced dry AMD or geographic atrophy. We're pretty optimistic about some of the results, and we anticipate continuing to invest in that program and moving it along. So over the years, we've also explored the cardiac space internally. We've had a T-cell-based immunotherapy program for melanoma that was actually run out of our La Jolla facility right up the road for a few years. So we've had that experience of thinking about that business model. And then to round that off, many of you may know Mark Zimmerman, who leads our Betalogics effort, which is a pluripotent stem cell platform in diabetes.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Look, we're going to explore both the people and organizational commitment or curiosity. We're going to look at science. We're going to look at the business case around cell therapy. But maybe just to encapsulate all of that, whoever wants to answer this question, let me just give you a hypothetical. It's 5 years from now. There's a major headline that says blank corporation has major cell therapy breakthrough, multi-billion-dollar opportunity exploited. Unfortunately, it's not your company. What did you not do inside your respective organization to not be that company on the headline then?
Well, I don't know if it needs to be our company, given how young this space is and how many advances are going to come in the future. You know, the first monoclonal antibody company, Centocor and J&J, had great foresight there. They weren't the only monoclonal antibody company. Many others came and followed, and here we now have a whole industry of a number of therapeutics. So I don't know that we'd be disappointed. For us, it would be validation and confirmation of this whole space, that cell therapy can be a meaningful therapeutic, and it would just help us continue to double down on our efforts to bring those therapies to market.
I would say we would have failed to focus. You know, that bringing and getting a cell therapy product across the goal line into the marketplace, I think we've heard over the past day and a half as really paying a lot of attention to a lot of details and really building up a strong scientific and manufacturing package. And I think one of the risks is that you get diluted across multiple efforts, and I think focus is critical.
Maybe just stay on that for a moment before I give the chance to the other two gentlemen. But I think that's a very good answer, just how I would think about it as well. And so you would really impart to the group that J&J has been through a learning curve of looking at many different things, and you feel comfortable now you're on something that could potentially make you that company in that headline.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we've been through some hard times in J&J too, and I think that because we've operated like a startup, you know, I've had to make some tough decisions about what I was going to fund and what not. And I think I came to the conclusion a number of years ago that if I was going to garner further investment in the future, I was going to have to drive one thing to success, to validate the platform. And that's the approach that we've taken.
Just one other follow-up. So as you had to get one thing to be successful, you could focus on the biggest opportunity, you could focus on the lowest scientific risk. There'd be a whole host of ways you could make that decision. What was the factor that most drove your decision to where you are right now?
Yeah, I think it was a number of things. Some of it was opportunistic. Some of it was where I thought we would wind up with a differentiated product in the marketplace. To be able to get there, most cell-based products require some form of delivery, ideally, in not all cases, but, in our view, targeted delivery. Being able to deliver in the eye had a certain appeal. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about this later. One of the key things in developing a biologic is when you have to make that manufacturing investment, frequently at a time where let's say your scientific package is not so robust. So picking something where the investment wasn't huge, where the scale was relatively small, was attractive to us.
Adel or Jason, please.
So, I would say that I wouldn't view that the company have reached the finish line before me as necessarily a negative thing. Actually, I would feel good about it for a couple of reasons. A, it would provide sort of a proof of concept for the entire enterprise of cell therapy, which I think we've seen very positive development, but we still need to continue to see more positive developments on that road so we can have more commitment from larger companies, I would say. The other thing is I would say that having had the good luck of working on Humira for some elements of its development, I do think that being a first in class does not necessarily mean the best in class. So sometimes you would wait to learn from others who actually have made it to the finish line before you. So I think it's a positive development to have somebody else up there.
It's very interesting. That's not the normal answer in most industries, right? Being first garners most of the profit in most industries, but in this case, you're having a very different answer. Jason, any further thoughts?
I agree with generally from the panel, and it would be fantastic for the field if that occurred and it was a multi-billion-dollar drug, medicine. There's a number of programs in phase 2 and phase 3, and the data that will read out in the next 2 or 3 years will be very instructive. And as Adel mentioned, it's not necessarily going to be that first medicine that could maybe deliver that. Mm-hmm. I think there'll be a wave of these potentially. And I think the clinical data, we would be positioned, certainly from GSK, we know what we're interested in today, what we might be interested in the next several years in this space.
So just to paraphrase then, that company that achieved that success would be overall a real positive for your work, for the industry, because it would be a success proof statement. Maybe just a next question would be to share with the group, what's it like to be you inside your large organization? Are you a pioneer? Are you off on the kind of the side doing the crazy science, or are you mainstream and the CEO's watching your work every day because they need it to deliver?
Well, the CEO is watching our work every day, mainly because we're spending money every day and he wants to make sure it's spent wisely. But I think there really is a credibility issue, and that's why I think if that headline appeared, it would benefit all of us because it would finally provide that credibility. Cell therapy is a meaningful therapeutic that's going to help patients and also generate revenue. For us, it's data. We need credible clinical data, controlled, randomized studies that our colleagues on the small molecule, on the biologic side have run and have shown that their therapies have advantages for patients. So within our organization, there is some skepticism. We've actually created a biotech within a larger biotech where the cell therapy group is off-site, our own manufacturing, our own building with research, development, our administrative group. It's apart from the rest of Celgene so that we can nurture it and treat it as a smaller company and ultimately get there. But data showing that these products actually have an effect in patients is critical before we're going to really have that kind of credibility within our organization.
I agree. I mean, certainly from a GSK perspective, the work that we're doing in partnership on the stem cell gene therapies and the clinical data that's come out of those programs has been, in the spotlight internally and externally over the recent months. And clinical data trumps everything. And I think it's going to be incredibly important. This is going to be a new way of making medicines. And it's new for patients, it's new for regulators, it's new for the payers, and it's new for pharma. And so when we look at the next wave, we're still waiting for that strong science and strong clinical data, as was alluded to.
But Jason, you're in the organization now. You had to commit to take on this work. When you're hiring somebody to come with you on the journey, is it a hard sell? Is it people saying, I don't really want to risk my career over there with you, Jason? Or
no, it's actually not been a hard sell internally to date, and we're looking to potentially increase that investment based on the strength of the clinical data that's coming out. I should point out that GSK considers regenerative medicine is also small molecules and biopharma approaches to regenerate tissues. And we actually have a regenerative medicine, Promacta. It stimulates bone marrow progenitors to produce platelets. It's approved in 70 countries and sells well. And if we could find similar small molecules that regenerate the brain, the heart, the pancreas, that's also part of our future vision for regenerative medicine.
So not a risky area inside GSK for somebody to go work for you. This is a hot area inside GSK?
For the right phenotype of person?
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, we have a biotech culture approach to this. I'm from biotech originally. And really we also have to deliver in R&D. It's not a tenure track university professorship role. So we need to deliver. We need to deliver value for patients, and we're also a business as well.
But what we're finding is it's those many people younger in their career who look at the span of their career and really believe that cell therapy will transform the practice of medicine. So if you have a 10, 20, 30-year horizon, this is the place to be. Small molecules have already had their run, biologics as well. So we've been able to attract a lot of great engineers, PhDs, young people on the business side who really want to have a major impact throughout their career, and they believe this is the place to do it. And for us, as we talk about clinical data, one of the things that really helped coalesce cell therapy within Celgene was the data that Carl June has produced, and we've entered into our own collaboration on CAR-T with Bluebird Bio and Baylor School of Medicine. But once those data were out there, small number of patients, profound impact on those patients, the rest of our group at Celgene started to recognize that this is a meaningful therapeutic, and hence we did a major corporate collaboration.
It's very helpful. Rob or Adel, what's it like inside Baxter or J&J?
So, I mean, I would say that I really, having come from a sort of a structured small molecule development background, I do enjoy the ambiguity that cell therapy has. I think this ambiguity definitely comes with challenges, but it also allows you for a lot of space for creativity that's not necessarily part and parcel of the day in and day out of a drug development model in a typical company. So that also not only translates into a lot of space for innovation within the team, but also when you interact with regulatory agencies, some of them actually, some of the people on the across the table want to learn from your development efforts, want to understand what you're. So it becomes more of a collaborative approach rather than the typical challenging approach that you can see when everything is set in stone. Mm-hmm. So I do think it's very enjoyable. I do think also that all of us might be familiar with some of the quotes regarding if you can't risk, you won't win as much, at least. I do think that there's a higher risk given the uncertainty and the ambiguity of the cell therapy space, but also the stakes are very high, both for the patients that stand to benefit from this, and also for the teams and the companies and the enterprises that are built on these projects.
Rob, are you?
I'm still trying to figure it out. No, it depends upon the day group. So at J&J, we've tended to run most of these programs, like I said, like individual milestone-based projects. So you live and die by the milestones. I think it's given us a lot of focus. It's not for everybody, although, you know, I think you can easily select by phenotype and find the people that really think that this is exciting rather than risky. But I have to say, you know, as we move the program along, and there's nothing like a little bit of data to you know, to help smooth things out.
Just a comment.
Yeah, please.
Certainly at GSK, we run all of our cell therapy and most of our regenerative medicine programs in partnerships with external groups, academics and biotechs. And so we look to try and, you know, deploy the expertise from GSK, maybe it's in clinical or regulatory or elsewhere in the organization, onto those programs. And so that's part of our strategy, is not to try and do it all internally where we don't know.
Thank you for that, because that's maybe the next question I was going to ask each of you is there something unique to how you are organized and how you implement your work that would be different than other classes of therapeutic solutions, antibodies or proteins, as an example? Perry, in chatting with you, obviously you're kind of soup to nuts, total workflow, manufacturing. Is that, maybe just talk a little bit more about how that's unique?
It is very unique, certainly within Celgene. We are the only fully integrated business within Celgene other than Celgene itself, because we do have everything in one site, from manufacturing to discovery research, development, regulatory, a small commercial business. So definitely that construct is different. I think one of the big differences as we pursue the science is not knowing the mechanism of action. When you're working on small molecules for the most part and biologics for the most part, you have a good sense for mechanism of action and how these agents work in the body. We don't know how our cells work. We're trying to elucidate it, as all of us are, but I think that's going to take a long time. These cells probably work differently in each patient based on the patient's environment. So that unknown makes it a little bit more difficult to pursue this science, and again, a reason for us to be a standalone unit, because what we're pursuing is so much different than the rest of Celgene. And until we're ready to commercialize, it doesn't make sense to draw on a lot of those resources at this stage.
Yeah, very helpful. How about in J&J or in Baxter? Is there a unique way you organize yourself to implement your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So J&J, like a lot of other companies, is, you know, we're organized by therapeutic area. And then we have platform functional groups. So we have small molecule platform and all the associated functions and technologies to support that. And then a biotech, primarily monoclonal antibody platform. I mean, we reside primarily within the biotech group. But, you know, again, we've really, over the years, really thought about, well, what are the core competencies that we need to develop as a group, as a cell therapy group? And what are those that we can leverage more broadly from the organization, not reinvent the wheel? And what are those things that we get outside of the company? So, and we do a lot of each, keep the group fairly small. Most of our disease modeling, a lot of our mechanistic work is done with experts at, you know, academic sites. The core capabilities of the group, I think, are mostly related to you know, small-scale process development, potency assay discovery, early assay development that we then pass on to our, you know, our analytic groups, and you know, really think about not building any more infrastructure than we absolutely need to get to the next inflection point.
I think it's. I think right now, for a project team working on a cell therapy, it's important to factor in the process for harvesting, manufacturing, delivering the cells. I think in a typical project team working on a small molecule, and perhaps now a biologic, but I can imagine from what I know that biologics, when they started out, the process was also figuring out very importantly in the project team-oriented development. So the thing that it was very humbling for me that I found out that, you know, how much there's a lot of information that I learned from my colleagues on the manufacturing side. But also I found out that in order for us to have a successful project team, we really have to work hand in hand, not just the typical, I'm the CMC person and you're the development person. We're just going to interact when there's a problem or when somebody sends a question. So we're just going to have to work close. I think that's the major takeaway from a development perspective.
How much of a hurdle inside your respective organizations is the value creation, the business problem that these therapies might be very expensive, that one person may pay for them, but another entity may get the benefit just due to the timing? Somebody's in insurance, is less than 5 years with a typical insurance carrier. Just curious how big of a business problem that is in your conversations with your colleagues inside your company.
We're an oncology company, so we're used to that question about the trade-offs between benefit and risk and the pharmacoeconomics of our therapies. Our firm belief is if we can demonstrate the efficacy, if we can extend patients' lives, allow people to continue to live productive, full lives, that we ultimately will figure out the economic model. And when we entered into the CAR-T collaboration with Bluebird and Baylor, the commercialization model is not quite there yet. This is an autologous therapy. We don't know if it's going to be a one-time use or if it's going to need to be repeated. But we believe that those clinical endpoints, the clinical efficacy can be so profound that ultimately we as an industry and society as a whole will figure out the right way to pay for it. So we lead with the science, with the efficacy, the impact on the patients, keeping in mind the need to make sure that we're doing what payers are going to want us to do to get reimbursement, but we believe it'll come if we can show a great enough impact.
Any other?
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a business argument. It's having a compelling commercialization and business model that you're able to make it, get it, supply it to the end user that's going to use it. Are they going to want to use it? And is it going to be adequately differentiated in the marketplace for them to use it? And are you going to be able to make a health economic argument to third-party payers that's successful?
I think one of the parallels here is probably with the oligonucleotide and gene therapy field. Some of the early medicines that may get approved were likely to be in rare, unmet need diseases. Mm-hmm. And then you can see how that business model potentially with a platform can expand into less rare diseases after that. So that's certainly one of our strategies.
Adel, in our preparation conversations, you had said you wanted to talk about the clinical development of these therapies and how that will all kind of transpire. Maybe just elaborate a little bit more the thought you had around that.
Sure. So I think one of the challenges that we have in cell therapy development was trying to adapt the traditional models that we've developed for other therapeutics to cell therapy. I think definitely there are elements of these that are transferable, but there are other elements perhaps that are not easily transferable. So I think, looking at a particular sample size for a trial, just because that's the adequate, well-controlled trial that we have in the regulations that you have to get a therapy approved, that you have to have one or two of these trials. I think these are elements that I think we should continue to push against in a rational way, in a realistic way. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there are many elements in traditional drug development that are up for challenge in the cell therapy field. And actually, we've been seeing some flexibility from regulatory colleagues, other entities that stakeholders that are willing to work with us on that. So I think that is really one thing that I would want to make out as part of this discussion. Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good point. We found that our interactions with the regulators have been extremely positive, very iterative. I think what we've seen with the FDA and even in Europe is that they also are figuring out the regulatory science and are very willing to partner with us, which you don't necessarily see in other areas of the industry. So for us, it's been a tremendous benefit in being able to work through some of our issues and to also gain from some of their experience. They obviously can't tell you directly what they've seen with other companies, but they can steer you in a direction that gives you a sense of what they've been seeing, and that's been extremely helpful for us.
Yeah.
And just to follow up on the earlier phase of clinical development, I think there are two truisms about drug development. It's really hard, So the failure rate is 90% at the start of phase 1. That's for molecules that you might know the target and enroll in disease biology. Second, it's expensive. It's over $1 billion for cost of development for drugs. So, so those pressures are very important for the first clinical experiments. And that translational medicine study, the first one, is really important to be able to come out of that with at least a hypothesis to test in phase 2 and an idea of safety guaranteed, and then some sort of mechanistic question you can answer. And I think for this field, it'll be very important over the next few years as those data come out. And you could take examples like the CAR therapies and some of the stem cell gene therapies where it is clear in the early trials that there is a signal. Right. And then you can make that type of investment into the phase 2 and phase 3 programs.
Well, there's a lot of smaller companies here, and I'm sure all of you have your doors open and available to take meetings. What advice would you give these companies who do want to partner with your organization? What are you looking for? What really hits the target zone for you?
Well, having personally been in both large and small companies, and we all know because we've been in this industry a while, it's all about perseverance and persistence and pushing forward to generate that clinical data. As we look at the landscape at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics, we're very interested in partnering. We're looking at early-stage technologies that will complement or fill gaps in our own portfolio, at products that are in early to mid-stage development in specific disease areas where we currently aren't playing. But it is all about the data and showing that what you have can generate those meaningful data. And what you have today may not represent what you're going to have a year or two from now. And it is all just continuing to forge ahead, finding the capital as best you can to do that. Because these are long-term relationships, and especially in this space where today we have 600 people here, and a couple of years from now we'll have thousands, we're all evolving, and these relationships are going to be lifelong and going to be fruitful for both of us as we go forward.
I agree.
Any other thoughts, advice you would have for companies looking to partner with you all?
I think it's building the most robust scientific package that you can. And this has been a theme in this meeting, and I fully agree with it. That really having a mechanism-based, comparability plan where you can translate mechanistic data, at least testable hypotheses that can eventually be translated to the critical quality attributes of the product, like the potency assay, are really important to be able to convince, large company investors that they're taking on an investment that's got a manageable amount of risk.
Maybe just switching topics again and talk about what could derail your company's enthusiasm for this area. There have been lots of anecdotes about people traveling overseas to get early stem cell therapy. Argued that Peyton Manning got that done, and look how it's working for him. Just maybe go down the line here. What's your own opinion of that? Is that good or is that bad? And what should be done if you could wave a wand?
Yeah, it's funny you mention that because we actually have this discussion semi-seriously within Celgene. Should we open up a stem cell clinic in the Bahamas and have our cells available for medical tourism? Personally, having been in this industry many years, I'm not in favor of that approach. I'm much more on the ethical side, and we'll move through the clinical and regulatory pathways and get products to market. I'm hoping that Celgene, given our history, will not waver from the commitment to cell therapy, that we inevitably at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics will have failures, and there'll be failures in the industry. And we all saw what happened with gene therapy and how that was derailed for many years based on a horrible failure. But now it's back, and it's hopefully going to provide very meaningful benefits to patients. So again, I think it is the commitment, and you need organizations that have gone through those peaks and valleys of successes and failures to just commit to the science, believe, and forge forward until we all ultimately do have those successes.
I think that business indicates the unmet need and the clinical need for this type of medicine. I think it's a lost opportunity that there haven't been more publications coming out of those experiences because there are thousands of those transplants done every year. We're not involved with it at GSK, but it's interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I would say that having said earlier that we should adapt the traditional drug development paradigm to cell therapy, one of the things that we should not do away with is rigorous benefit-risk analysis. I think that I think a robust benefit-risk analysis should stand on its feet, whether it's on an island or in the United States or in Europe. And I think it's a risky endeavor for our industry to try to short-circuit that by finding an easy way out. I think we might do more harm than good if we follow that path.
Mm-hmm. Rob, do you have any other thing to add there?
I don't. I mean, it's hard to endorse unproven therapies. So, I mean, and I think that medical tourism at best reflects sort of a mixed bag and takes advantage of, people's vulnerabilities also. And I think there's not that much we can do about it other than, let's say, through the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, educate and have a position about that. But I fully agree that most developed countries have regulations for a reason to protect their population from unproven therapies and downside. So.
Right. Why don't we, at this point, open it up to you and any questions that you may have. There's a gentleman with the mic here. Okay. There's one in the back.
Thank you. This is Superpocket. I heard you pretty much avoid the question of business model. And having been a big pharma guy for most of my industry life, at least, I'm still curious to hear what the answer is. So the pharma business model now is selling things in small packs, and now they're selling actually different things in even smaller packs and deliver more value. But coming from the good old world of CM&C, which means chemical manufacturing and controls and all that, how do you see that fit in existing big pharma companies? And how do you create a business model with it or besides it, or what are you going to do?
So, it's a great question, and I don't think we were trying to avoid it. But so I think for big pharma, particularly big biotech, the business model they understand the best is the allogeneic, off-the-shelf, cryopreserved product. It's a little more complex because of, if it's a cold chain that requires liquid nitrogen, more complicated. But then there's a lot of knock-ons to that, and I think that this is one of the challenges of selling these products to large farm companies. If you're a large farm company and most of your expertise and core capabilities are in small molecule, this is a huge leap, because even moving from small molecule to a monoclonal antibody is a big difference in terms of the manufacturing capabilities. But I think to take it a step further, there's obviously a big difference between a cryopreserved allogeneic product and an autologous model. We've had some experience in both. Doesn't mean that you couldn't make the business model work. It's just that the autologous model has many more constraints, I think, placed on it. But then you have to think about, well, what is the end user? How is that product, cryopreserved product, going to be used? Does it need to be available on site and held in inventory for an acute, treatment indication? Or can it be something that could be shipped just in time for an elective procedure? When you start thinking about that, you may start thinking about, well, what are the indications I really want to pursue, and what's it going to cost for me to set up that supply chain in order to be able to do that? And then the next step is, okay, well, how is that product going to be delivered? Is it a simple injection that can be done in the office? Is it an IV infusion? Or in our case, it's a microcatheter subretinal delivery by a vitreoretinal surgeon in an operating room-like setting. And for a pharma company, that's more like, in that case, that's more like a surgical selling model for a device company rather than a traditional farm sales force. So, I think that, to me, this stuff is exciting, right? So that it's solving problems, but you have to really think way ahead in terms of what the product is going to look like and how it's going to be sold. If it does require a surgical procedure, is it something that any surgeon can do, or do you have to train the surgeons? And are you going to have a center of excellence model?
But Rob, I guess maybe more germane to the question, given all of those variables, and they're all different than the core primary capability of the company, let's just say, why do we not see more of this kind of cardoning off of the business unit like we see in Celgene to say, that's so different, you over there go figure that out, and you're going to be autonomous until it all gets worked out?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess I don't know how you're organized, but we are kind of, my group is separate. We are able to leverage some of the pieces of our business that are worthwhile, but we've had to carve out, let's say, this quality space in particular to allow us to move these products along in otherwise mature platforms. I think a lot of it depends upon the specific product and how you think you're going to get there, and whether you're going to do it on your own or you're going to partner to do certain aspects of it.
But the business model obviously is a key question, and at Celgene Cellular Therapeutics, we just recently, 6 months ago, hired our first real commercial person into an enterprise of 162 people who are mostly engineers and PhDs and MDs. And that has been a real eye-opener for the entire organization, for our technical operations people who thought we could ship a nitrogen tank to a podiatrist's office to do an injection for wound care, to our clinical folks who weren't necessarily thinking about the type of clinical efficacy we'd need to have and the indications we want to move into to really be able to invest the resources we'd need to get to an approval. So we do believe that if we can show the efficacy, the model will follow, but it's now something that we're consciously focused on every step of the way, and we will build out our commercial team to have that impact on the division as we continue forward in the clinic. But it's critical.
Yep. The business model question comes up regularly, and I agree with the previous comments there, but it really depends on the clinical data and the value to the patients and the payers. And it has been done, cell therapy, with the wound care business. In the allogeneic setting, and we'll certainly at GSK we're looking to do it for the autologous setting as well, and around a pipeline of medicines.
Other questions? There's one here in front. Over there. Sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, John Thomas, chairman of CIRM. Jason alluded to the fact that GSK is looking to form alliances with academics or small companies, well, I forget exactly what you said, as a way of outsourcing R&D and developing pipeline and all that sort of thing. Obviously, there are lots of small companies here who would love to figure out how to form strategic alliances with you, and likewise, tomorrow at our Science Day, there will be many academics who are interested in the same thing. I'd love to hear from each member of the panel what you're doing to facilitate those strategic alliances and how people could approach you and try to develop same.
Yeah, I'll just deliver a commercial for Celgene Cellular Therapeutics. We are very open to discussions with academicians, with small companies that either have technology platforms or have products in development. Again, we're looking to fill in some areas where we currently don't have major initiatives, things like iPS cells or indications where we're not playing, orthopedics, cardiovascular. So we have one of our business development people here at the meeting. We have a group back in New Jersey on the science side that's looking for scientific partnerships. And what we intend to do is to try to replicate what Celgene has been able to do on the hematology oncology side with partnerships across that whole spectrum, where they are win-win relationships, both companies benefit, and ultimately we can advance products to the market. So if you have ideas, if you have something in your company, we're open to hearing the story.
Any other commercials? There's a couple other questions. Why don't you go there a little closer, and then we'll go to this one here.
Yeah, my name is Bob Hutchins. I'm with STEM Biosys. This is actually the first time I've come to this meeting. I'm a career management consultant. In fact, two of the companies up there were clients of mine at one time. I was with Booz & Company for 10 plus years, and then other consulting firms before that. I'm struck by one thing, and I've been trying to figure out who to ask this question to, and I suspect the four of you on this panel have been asked this by your CEOs at one time or another, so I'll pose it to you. Why aren't we further along? I've sat through a day and a half of presentations, and everything is sitting phase 1, phase 2, got some phase 3, I heard that this morning. My hypothesis had been that we had a financial crisis that brought everything to a screeching halt in 2008. You guys would have been able to work through that, so I've kind of put that one aside. And I'm really just sitting here struggling. Why haven't we seen something? Is the science hard? Is it money? Is it will? Is it all of them? Just curious. Thanks.
Well, I think that, we went through this, hype phase, of early in the industry, and a lot of hype about promise, and it's hard. And the hope got ahead of the science, and I think things have been shaking out. But I actually think we're on the uptick again, and I think that in the next 5 years we'll have some of those big successes. Pretty optimistic.
We get asked that question all the time by our CEO and our board. The science is hard. And when were the first hybridomas done? In the late 70s? And how long did it take till we had a monoclonal antibody that was a therapeutic? Was it 20 years, 15, 20 years afterwards? So this is hard science. We've encountered roadblocks where we've seen various issues with adverse reactions. We've had to step back and look at dose and administration. I'm sure all of us have encountered that. So it isn't a lack of will or commitment on the financial or the human resource side, but it is really tough science, and we're paving a whole new area. Fortunately, we are starting to see that emerge with phase 2 programs, companies moving into phase 3, and over the coming years, we're going to see products get to the market. But this is a really hard area.
I mean, I think it's a function of being in early development, as Jason had mentioned earlier. I think the failure rate in early clinical development is much higher in comparison to late development. So by function of the timing of how these therapies emerged, there's a high failure rate. And right now we are at the position for the first time to see advanced programs that really stand a good chance of success. So I don't know if it's of an issue besides it's a long, arduous journey.
Well, but just maybe take his question one step further. In your work in the organization, do you appeal to your CEO to double the money to you because then you could move faster down the pathway, if you will?
For us, it isn't a money issue necessarily. We have the money we need, and if we show success, I think there'll be more money forthcoming. And we are able to attract the human resources we need to move things forward. But in any aspect of this industry, it takes a long time to develop drugs. But in this space in particular, because of the unknown mechanism of action, because you have to go slowly, given the potential adverse effects we're going to see, it just takes time. So for us, necessarily, it's not more money. If I had to double the budget, I don't think I could certainly move twice as fast. It's just moving it forward methodically, thoughtfully, and very prudently.
Yeah, and I think to the original question, there's been a lot of programs that haven't worked clinically for a lot of scientific and other reasons, and dose and mechanism. And so, yeah, there have been successes. There's been successes in the wound care, epithelial cells, hematopoietic stem cells work. They've been used for 40 years. So there are examples of where good mechanistic and scientific understanding and clinical translation it can work.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to one more question, then we'll give each of you a final word to answer the question. Is Big Pharma curious, or are they fully committed into the space? So,
I'm Stan Fleming with Forward Ventures, and I want to follow up on the CRM question that was asked earlier. That was in conjunction with the relationship between Big Pharma and academics. And I'm curious about the relationship or the role that you see for the venture community to play in this area. In other words, much of the activity and the opportunity is taking place in the entrepreneurial community, and you guys have all have made a very important commitment to that whole area. And yet, in the case of biologics in the first place, but certainly in monoclonals and in cell therapies and other ones, traditionally the venture guys have been out in front and have really created a lot of the opportunities. In this case, it certainly sounds to me like pharma is out ahead here of the venture guys. So what sort of a role do you imagine for venture to play in the development of this space?
I might be biased. I've been on the venture capital side. I run a venture-backed company, but I think venture capital plays a critical role, and if nothing else, from a credibility and a validation standpoint. When all of you start investing in early-stage cell therapy companies, the industry, it will be another indication that the industry has arrived, and we really need to see that happening. I don't have to tell you, you guys have been investing in early-stage science for many years, and as you see cell therapy as that next future wave and start making those investments, it will create a pipeline of products, technologies for all of us to bring in-house, and it will also lend credibility to this field that you're willing to put your money behind a very nascent but very promising field.
So just to follow on that, because we have a big commitment to venture community at GSK, and I think this field particularly comes in ebbs and flow. Over the last 3 to 5 years, there probably hasn't been as much pharma interest, so the exits aren't as clear for early venture. Yet, I think there are now more exits that you could think about in a shorter period of time with a lower investment that probably appeals to those venture metrics. And I think there are examples of startups and other ways of doing that venture investment in this ecosystem.
Well, we only have a few minutes left. Gentlemen, again, thank you very much. I'd like to give each of you a final word just to come back to the original theme of, as representatives of the larger pharmaceutical entities, do you see this class of organizations fully committed, or are you still a bit of a curiosity inside your respective organizations? Whoever would like to go first.
I'd say we're somewhere in between.
Okay.
Yeah, which is better than being a curiosity only. I think that, I think that you really have to put it, just to make a couple of points. I think pharm being fully committed means that they're making the investment to commercialize the product. And to understand what that means for a large company, that means making a manufacturing investment about 2 years before you're starting your phase 3 program in order to have the facility, the process development, the equipment validated, and everything that you have to do to dose that first patient. It's a big undertaking. So I think that means that in order to garner that investment, like we've said before, you need some clinical data to suggest that you've got a differentiated and meaningful product relative to the competition and relative to the other burdens that are on the product, like its delivery and how, whether there's a surgical procedure. There needs to be an executable path to manufacturing, and you would have had to at least address some of the business model issues that I talked about to. So that you think the issue is solvable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Jason?
Yeah, we are 100% committed to the programs that we've invested in the cell therapy area, and also using stem cell technologies for drug discovery, and see both of those in tandem, and very excited and positive about the next 3 years, 5 years.
Yeah, and we're also very committed, not to say that Celgene Cellular Therapeutics isn't still a curiosity within Celgene, but we're firmly committed because we do believe that this whole therapeutic modality does have the potential to transform the practice of medicine, and we're behind it to deliver it to patients.
I can't really speak on behalf of the larger corporation, but what I can speak on how I feel. So I do feel that we do have a lot of resources that are made available to us at a team level, at an enterprise level that speak to the commitment that the company has. We get asked tough questions all the time, but I don't necessarily these tough questions mean that the company is not committed to the program or the project or the enterprise.
Well, please join me in a round of applause for our panelists this afternoon. Thank you very much.